Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of Moving the Goalpost. I am your host, Danny Mills. With me tonight, Nicholas Orr. Morty, how's everything going on this Sunday night?
Going good, no complaints.
Awesome. So, Morty and I, we're going to run through our top picks for each round in regards to best ball, ADPs based off of underdog rankings. We're going to do a two-part episode. We're going to go 1 through 9, 10 through 18. Just a friendly reminder, best ball is just typically an 18-round draft. Once you draft, that is it. You don't have to set your lineup. It is optimized for you each week. So there is a little bit of strategy that's involved for it. Morty and I are just going to break down our picks and just kind of run through each round. And with that, Morty did kind of show his hand to me. He let me know that his number one pick for the first round was JJ. And Morty, you want to lead into that and just go into your first pick and touch on that?
Yeah, sort of a boring selection, I guess. I could have picked somebody else, but to me, Justin Jefferson is just like easily the number one overall selection, number one overall player. He had 304 points last year and half PPR. And I just feel like he's in a separate tier from Chase, even. And I'm a big Bengals fan, Chase fan, obviously. So trying to not be biased there, but I just think still Jefferson is in a class of his own. And I never doubt myself whenever I have the first overall pick. Like, I'm never thinking about selecting anybody else. It's always Jefferson. Most of the other picks in the first round, you could sort of make a debate, and it's like, is Diggs or Brown or Lamb the better pick? Should you take Kelsey at the 5-6, or should you wait because he's getting old? Is Cup hurt? Is Tyreek going to face a suspension? Is CMC worth taking in the first round because you can get all these good running backs in the second? So I feel like there's just question marks at a lot of these other positions. Jefferson's the easy first overall, so that's why he's my pick.
And I like that a lot, and I agree that JJ's an easy click at one. And as you said, there's not really much thought process to it. I also like the builds that go in with the first pick in the 101 with Jefferson. There's a lot that you can come back with. So as you said, pretty simple, but pretty straightforward as well for Morty's first pick. For my first pick, I went ahead. I did go a little different. I could agree with Morty, but I wanted to change it up just a bit since he did tip his hand to me with that. And I went with Tyreek Hill, whose current ADP right now is 4.5. Sometimes he's going at 3 ahead of CMC. Morty and I have seen him drop sometimes to 6, 7, even 8 in some of the best ball drafts on Underdog. Last year he did finish third, half PPR. He topped 1,700, even with Waddle coming in close to almost 1,400. I genuinely think if Tua stays healthy, Tua could definitely throw for 4,500 to 5,000 yards. I think he could have that type of year, and if he does, outside of Hill and Waddle, that ball's not going to get shared much more than that. So I could see Tyreek, as he said, being one of the first receivers to push 2,000. Waddle obviously would be a nice second behind him. I also like how Tyreek came out and said that he has a greater understanding of McDaniel's offense this year. He's not just running around getting open. He said he understands the philosophies and the schemes. He understands how to read the defense. So this year he's in better position and understands the offense that much better. So I think the second year overall for them, they'll click. And Tyreek, if he's there at 4 for me, is an easy click every time.
Yeah, can't argue that. I love Tyreek this year as well. So my second round pick favorite, 80, favorite based on ADP is going to be Tony Pollard. Currently going around 18.5. About a month ago, he was consistently going like 22, 23, 24. And I drafted him a ton whenever he was falling in that range. He ended up finishing as the RB7 last year. He was ninth in fantasy points per game. And I saw a tweet from Scott Barrett on Twitter that said, if Pollard maintained his efficiency and got 25% of Zeke's now vacated workload, he would have finished as the third running back in fantasy points per game. If he got 33% of Zeke's work, he would be second. And if he got 40% of Zeke's work, he would finish first with 22.2 fantasy points per game. So to me, assuming that they don't re-sign Zeke or bring in somebody else, he's definitely going to have a bigger workload this year. I think that we've all been waiting for him to be in this role where he is going to be able to hopefully have more goal line work, more carries inside the 5, just overall more usage. And I think he's going to crush it this year. I could easily see him finishing ahead of everyone else and being the RB1 on the year. And currently with him going off as basically like the RB6, I love that pick and I have a ton of them.
Yeah, Pollard is definitely one of my hired own shares as well. I like that tweet too and agree with it. If he does get bulk of Zeke's work, I think he could have a good path to compete for the one spot this year in fantasy. For me, coming back in round 2, I thought the easy click was Devante Adams. I have him ranked still in the first round this year ahead of a couple guys. I understand some of the concerns that we've had last year. I was one of those people who I actually kind of got burned on the fate of Adams last year with the age, having Derek Carr as his quarterback. This year, Jimmy G comes in. Morty and I talked about this. I don't think there's that big of a drop off between the two quarterbacks. I'm gonna bet on Devante's talent. He's finished top 3 the last 3 years. He finished second last year for half PPR. So for me, Devante being in the second round, I think he is a very nice comeback.
Yeah, can't argue that. I like Devontae a lot too. I probably have him ranked ahead of some of those guys that are in that area too. Like I sort of feel more confident with him over like CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson. Like I probably would prefer Devontae over all of them. So definitely agree with that take as well. So my favorite pick in the third round is going to be Lamar Jackson at a current ADP of 34.8. And really the reason that he's my favorite pick in this area, he was honestly like going closer to the like 38, 39, 40 in that range earlier as well. So I have a ton of them then. And it was a little bit easier and actually possible to get Andrews and Lamar on the same team. Now it's much, much more difficult. But I think for me, if I look at Andrews, or not Andrews, if I look at Jackson compared to like Josh Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes, I don't think there's that big of a difference. And I think this is the most offensive weapons that he's ever had with Zay Flowers, Odell, still sort of to be determined what kind of role he'll play and how good he'll be. But Bateman, healthy Andrews, hopefully Dobbins is back. You know, I think that he just has a lot of offensive weapons. He's got the big contract now, new offensive coordinator that has already came out and said they're going to throw the ball more. So I just think his upside and even really his floor has to be pretty similar to those guys, and you can get him like a full round later than all those other quarterbacks. So that's why he's my favorite pick of the third round.
Yeah, and I think Lamar's an easy click in the third round, especially as I have him probably towards the end of the last tier for elite quarterbacks. And then just everything that you touched on, the rookies, Zay Flowers, Odell, just the amount of weapons that he has. I think somebody tweeted out it was he has 5 first round draft picks in his receiver core currently. So I like that as well. Andrews, even without Andrews, it's, Isiah likely steps in and the offense doesn't miss a heartbeat. For my third round, I came back. I went with my first running back. I think as you see, as we kind of go through this, I'm going to have a little bit of an NFC North theme. My third round pick was Mr. Jahmyr Gibbs at 35.4. Dan Campbell has come out. He's already said that Jahmyr Gibbs is basically going to be Lightning. David Montgomery will be the Thunder. They'll be 1A and 1B. Gibbs does have the pass catching ability with the usage upside as well, so high volume. For me, and I was taking a look at last year, and with Lenny last year, he had 668 yards rushing, 73 receptions, and 523 reception yards with 6 touchdowns, and that was good enough to finish 15th. So if Gibbs can do anything remotely close to that, he definitely has the talent for it. I think in Detroit, they'll have some shootout games, so he'll have the volume for it. He could have the upside of a top 12 back this year.
Yeah. And I mean, for them to use the pick on him where they did too, like it just shows you they have to be planning on using him a lot. And they never really got behind DeAndre Swift. So it was not a surprise to me. I think he definitely could have a huge year this year too. So moving along, fourth round pick. My favorite pick in this range is going to be Terry McLaurin. I think it's just about like consistency for me. Like I think Terry has been one of the best wide receivers in the league. He's had mediocre quarterback play since he was drafted, but he's always still had solid finishes. And I think this year Sam Howell will have a pretty decent year. I actually do like Howell and think that Dotson coming into his second year could maybe open things up a little bit more for Terry as well. And then, of course, new offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy's in town, coming over from Kansas City. I would certainly think the offense is going to see some improvements. Hopefully, they air it out a little bit more and get a little bit more creative than old Riverboat Ron, your favorite. And yeah, he finished as wide receiver 14 last year. He's currently being drafted as wide receiver 23. So I just feel like for where he's going, I would rather have him personally over like Drake London and Christian Watson and probably Jerry Jeudy, like three guys that are all going ahead of him. So that is why he is my favorite of the round.
And I like that a lot, being a Commanders fan, huge fan of Scary Terry. I hope that he does get the quarterback situation. I hope that it is a little more solidified in Washington for him, and Hal takes that leap that we're hoping he takes, at least as a Washington fan. I try not to be biased with that. He has put up 1,000 yards, I think, almost every year that he's been in the league. I'm not too sure on his rookie year, but as you said, regardless of the quarterback play, Scary has been Mr. Consistent. With everything that Morty had just said, that's honestly, you could just replace the names, as that's an easy transition into my round 4 pick, who would be DJ Moore. Last 3 years, he has 3 top 25 finishes, moves over to Chicago. I think Fields for him will be a big leap. I think he will be the Diggs or A.J. Brown to Josh Allen or Hurts. For Justin Fields, I think DJ Moore has top 15 potential upside. I mean, if he clears 1,000 yards receiving, 6 to 8 touchdowns, I think he could get there.
Yeah, and I like DJ Moore too. I guess it just depends if Fields improves as a passer. I mean, he obviously crushed it last year with his rushing ability. Hopefully, he will be able to be a little bit more consistent in the passing game, and DJ Moore should certainly give him someone. I think definitely the best talent he's had at wide receiver since he's been there. So coming into his new year here, I like DJ Moore as well. Moving on to the fifth round, my favorite selection of the round is going to be Aaron Jones. He's currently being drafted about 52nd overall as the RB16. I do think the Packers are going to rely more on the run this year. And even if they don't necessarily, he's still a good passing game asset. Like he is their pass catching back. The last 3 years, he's finished as the RB11, RB13, and RB5. Currently being drafted as the RB16, like I said. I don't think Rodgers was that great last year. So even if Love isn't great either, still think he should have a better year than where he's being drafted. And he's probably my favorite Packer to own. Like, I don't love Christian Watson. I never draft Romeo Doubs. And, A.J. Dillon does take away some of the work, obviously, but I just think that Jones is better. And, I mean, even last year, Dillon had 153 half point PPR points on the year. So it's not like he still had a pretty big year last year, and Jones still managed to finish as the RB11. So I like where he's going. Even though a lot of times I end up picking wide receiver in this range, I do think that he's a good value where he's at.
I do too, and I was literally just getting ready to say my hardest part is that I'm typically either going receiver or taking who I was getting ready to put as my pick, but I like Aaron Jones a lot this year too. I know he's on the cliff of 28, but I think with Love they're going to lean on him just a little bit more. He knows the system. They're in a softer division that could put up a lot of points. I think I think both of us are on the NFC North a little bit on our first couple rounds with that, but I agree with you. I like Aaron Jones a lot this year. Mine was kind of simple. It actually kind of goes back to back from DJ Moore. It just leads right into Mr. Justin Fields, who last year I was kind of out on. Wasn't a big fan of Ohio State quarterbacks. They typically start for a year, come into the league, and have mostly been a bust since I've been watching for at least the last 10 years. Last year, Fields definitely put my foot in my mouth. Darnell Mooney, Claypool, who didn't have the greatest reports to start camp, but if he can come back, they sign Komet, they have a good backfield. I think Fields really has an opportunity to push Hurts and those guys to finish first in fantasy this year.
Yeah, no, I definitely like it too. I have a lot of Fields. I know we did the $500 Bulldog draft. We ended up taking Fields in that too, and I have probably a disproportionate amount of money invested in him compared to like my actual percentage owned. But I do think like once he turned it on last year and was running and having these massive games, that he is sort of like the same thing with Lamar. Like he has the upside and potential. I would not be surprised at all if he finished as the QB1. So moving along to the sixth round, my favorite pick here is going to be Mike Evans, who is currently being drafted 66.6 overall, and that is currently the wide receiver 34. He has had 1,000 yards the last 9 years, crushes it every year. He was wide receiver 16 last year. That was with Brady playing terrible. I mean, the Bucs offense never got it together. They had very few games where they really had big offensive performances. He was wide receiver 8 the year prior. Obviously, Brady was much better then, but he's just been like a model of consistency every year. And if you look at like some of the season-long props and compare him to a lot of these guys that get drafted in the third and fourth round even, I mean, he has like a higher yardage prop than almost all of them. And I know obviously Baker is a wild card and a concern, but they're still going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to throw it to someone, and they're going to throw it to Evans and Godwin. They just are. So to me, I would be shocked if he finishes the wide receiver 34. Maybe he's not wide receiver 16 again or whatever, but I just think that with his consistency and how good of a player he is, how he's just a target monster whenever they get to the red zone. He's great at winning jump balls. I just don't see a scenario unless he gets hurt or something where he's not going to finish higher than a lot of these other guys that are being drafted ahead of him.
Yeah, and it's tough, man, when you put up 1,000 yards for the last 9 years to start betting against that. And he, as you said last year, they just never got it together in any way. I mean, week after week after week, we thought, Brady and the Bucs offense would click. Evans and Godwin. I don't even know how he got to 1,000 yards last year. That's how bad the Bucs offense was. I feel like it was like a Christmas miracle that in the last 2 weeks he had these phenomenal, crazy weeks and eclipsed the 1,000 yard mark.
Yeah.
All right. So for me, I went with Gabe Davis at 71.1. I think for Gabe last year, he was going in the fifth round. Currently, his ADP has been moving up a little bit more. He was floating around like 78, 79, and now he's floating around 71.1. So I like that this year you can get him on that discount. Again, if he connects on 2, 3, 4 more of those deep balls, you add those touchdowns, that yardage, he jumps from his finish at 27th. As Morty said with Evans, who he doesn't, he can't finish worse than 36. I think the same thing with Davis. I think he can't finish worse than what he did last year. I think if anything, he has more upside this year. The slot receiver between Sherfield and Shakir is up in the air. We have Kincaid coming in. You still have Dawson Knox there. So really it's still just Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. If they connect a little bit more this year, Gabe has huge upside at a 2-round discount from last year.
Yeah, definitely. I love Gabe too. I have a very high ownership percentage of him, and I agree. Like saying, just same thought process, really. He finishes like the wide receiver 36 last year or somewhere in that range. And to me, he had like a floor year. Like, I don't see him having a worse year. We know he can have these massive spike weeks where he has, 4 touchdowns, or I think it was the Steelers maybe they were playing where he had those 2 really long touchdowns. He finished with like 3 catches for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns or something. So that's always possible. And like, you just want exposure to good offenses. So if Diggs isn't crushing it, someone's got to have a big game. The Bills are going to put up points, and definitely like Gabe Davis a lot.
Yeah, we just need a little bit of playoff Gabe during the regular season, a bunch more, and we'll all be okay.
So, 7th round pick for me. My favorite pick is going to be more of a just like gut play. I just feel like he's going to have a big year. I don't know why, but it's going to be DeAndre Swift for me, going at 77.9. He finishes the RB22 last year, and really the Lions never liked him. They never gave him the workload we thought. He was being drafted like the end of the first round, early second round last year. So obviously he was a bust for that position. He was injured a little bit as well, but I just think being in Philadelphia, being part of an offense that is going to be in the red zone a lot, they're going to put up a lot of points. I still think that he's just a talented back, and I think that he's going to have a big year. He's just one of those people where when I get to this area, especially if I don't have a running back yet or only have one, there's not maybe a wide receiver that I'm like super confident in and love past, like Addison and Davis. So in some of these other running backs for me too, it's like, James Conner is close, David Montgomery, Rashad White. I would rather have someone on a really solid offense like the Eagles. And I just feel like he's going to have a big year. Like I said, it's just sort of a gut play, but that is my choice for the 7th round.
Well, and that's just betting on talent, right? Like Swift is somebody who I think last year was going at like the turn, right? In the second round as a running back for Detroit. We thought he would have this huge role. So I think you're right, man, with his talent in Philadelphia, one of the top offenses, one of the top offensive lines. As long as he stays healthy, he could absolutely have the talent to explode. My 7th round pick, I went ahead and went with Darren Waller. I think for me, he's in prime position to compete with Kelsey and Hawkinson and Andrews for that top spot. I think all camp reports have pointed to he has been Daniel Jones's favorite target to the point that they had to sit Waller out. So Jones would target other people. And I understand and know, we have to take camp reports lightly, but that's a strong sign. He is one of their bigger bodies. I think he has huge target share upside. Definitely has the red zone upside for touchdowns. And like I said, I think he's going to compete with those top guys this year for that top 3 spot as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, definitely like that call. I do think that he's poised to have a really big year there. And whenever you compare him to other people that are close, like even if you're looking at him versus like Dallas Goedert, to me, I would much rather have Waller. I think he has more upside, and Goddard has more target competition, certainly. And it's difficult with all the Giants wide receivers, too, to figure out who to draft and who they're actually going to use. I mean, last year, by the time we were halfway through the year, it was like just guys walking in off the street were suiting up. So I definitely think that Waller could see a ton of targets and certainly like him as well. So for my 8th round pick, I'm going to choose Isiah Pacheco, who I think is currently my highest owned player, maybe. Definitely highest owned running back, but I'm pretty sure highest owned overall. And really for me, it's simple. It's like the same concept. Like I just want exposure to good offenses, running backs that are going to be in a position to score a lot. The Chiefs are going to put up a ton of points, obviously. This is his second year in the league. Hopefully, just getting more familiar with Andy Reid's offense and having the trust the coaches more. I would expect certainly more touches out of him this year. There's reports that Edwards-Helaire may not even make the team. And Jerick McKinnon sort of had a career year last year. He's 31 now. That's that's pretty old, especially in running back age. It's very old. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get more work in the passing game and have more looks down in the red zone. Finish with more touchdowns than he had last year. I think he only had 5 rushing touchdowns, like 13 receptions. So not great. I'd ideally like to see more pass work, but just to be part of that offense, to have more exposure. And I think the Chiefs wide receiver situation is similar to that of the Giants, where it's like you don't really know who's going to emerge outside of Kelsey. And I definitely think Pacheco is going to be their go-to guy on the ground. And I just want exposure to it. So if I have Mahomes and I end up taking Pacheco, or if I have some teams from Pacheco as the first running back I draft even, so, and I feel pretty good about that. So definitely like him and plan on continue to grab him as much as I can.
Pacheco. So this is the first round that Morty and I get to that we are in agreement. So we did not discuss this outside of him telling me that JJ was his first pick. I completely agree with everything you just said. I don't think there's too much need to go in or divulge much more on Pacheco, but outside of everything you said, man, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that people tend to forget is Andy Reid, again, has always produced top fantasy running backs. It's been like the last 2 years that this has been a new thing that they really haven't. But I like Pacheco. He finished strong last year. He's somebody who I've definitely been upping my ownership on. And typically, too, at this point in the draft, I'm looking for my first or second running back. And I love Pacheco. I mean, it's hard to go wrong when he's on one of the best offenses. So I like those picks back to back more. Nice little Swift and Pacheco. And that'll lead you into round 9.
Yeah, so to finish things out here, I had to select a Bengal, and it's going to be Tyler Boyd for me, who's at the very back end of round 9, currently going right around 108. The thing with Cincinnati is their target distribution is just very condensed. They basically throw it to Boyd, Higgins, and Chase. And I don't know how Irv Smith will factor in and play a role in that, but he's just always consistent. And if Higgins or Chase miss any games at all, which they have over the last couple of years, Chase was out a while last year and Higgins missed some with a concussion. But he's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 51. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 30. Most years, he's consistent. He's never finished as the wide receiver 51 before. He actually had one thing that I thought was interesting. He had 25.5 points. That was his highest game last year, which is actually higher. It's a higher ceiling game than any game T had. So Higgins never had a game over 25.5 points, yet Boyd did. So the only reason I say that is just to show that he does have that upside capability. I think a lot of times we sort of think of him as someone that's just like consistent and he's going to finish with like 5 for 50 yards or something, which he does have a lot of those games. But to be getting him this late as the wide receiver 51, if I don't go running back in this range, definitely like him. I have some teams where I think yesterday I was drafting and I got him at like 123, where I already had a Bengals stack. So it's just free, it's just easy. I can't pass on him there. And yeah, that's why Mr. Boyd is my favorite pick of the 9th round.
I like Boyd as well, and I think that's actually a really, really good point about Higgins because I had Higgins in our home league last year, and now that you had mentioned that, I'm like, damn, Higgins really didn't put up. I don't think he put up more than like 22, 23 last year. Maybe might have been one of his max games if he even got that.
His biggest game in half PPR was 22.8. So he obviously finished with way more points. He finishes as a wide receiver 17, but that was with a couple games missed. And, but Boyd has the upside, in other words. But sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, no, no. That's perfect. That shows. I mean, for me, that shows Boyd's ceiling, and that his ceiling is just as high as Higgins. I mean, shit. I definitely didn't realize that from last year, so that was definitely something good to point out. For me, in round 9, I went with a receiver as well. This one is a tough pool. But for me, again, hopefully at this point in the draft, I'm taking him as my 5th or 6th receiver. I really don't think that he's somebody that you should utilize as your 2nd or 3rd receiver with the 6-game suspension. But my round 9 pick is Jameson Williams. Tops out the NFC North stack. Again, I just think it's a division that's going to have high shootout games. Golf in the system another year. Amon St. Brown. I think Jameson Williams had some really good sparks last year when he got the ball. He showed that he was a home run hitter. He definitely showcased his talent with the ball in his hand. So for him, 2 years removed from the injury, I think when he gets back from the suspension, as long as he shows maturity and he shows that he's healthy, he will show Detroit that he's a clear-cut number 2. And I think that he has elite talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, so that would bring us both to the end of round 9. When Morty and I come back next week, we're going to go through the second half of the best ball picks, 10 through 18. We'll be bringing that back to you next Sunday. Morty, did you have anything that you wanted to touch on or anything that you wanted to say before we close out?
No, I don't think so. That's it. Thanks for listening. If you found your way to this podcast, and look forward to discussing rounds 10 through 18 next week.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And as Morty said, if this finds you and you take a minute to listen, we greatly appreciate it. Any support is also greatly appreciated. Never hurts to press that like or hit that subscribe button. Both of those are free. And with that, everybody have a great night, and we'll see you soon.